Hello and welcome to the Liverpool.com podcast. I'm Dan Morgan. I'm joined this week by Liverpool.com staff writers Mark Wakefield and Joel Rabinowitz. Lads, I hope you're good. We are broadcasting the day after Liverpool secured Champions League qualification over Ajax with a 1-0 win at Anfield, and I think that's where we need to start because I think it's a massive win, Joel, and I think it'll become a massive win as the season sort of develops, and I think it'll be a win that when we look back on this season in whatever context, we see it as a big moment and a big landmark for this team, and particularly some of the players who played in it that night.
Definitely, you could tell from the way Klopp was after the game. It's by far the kind of happiest he's looked in a while, really. He's seen him very stressed and, quite frankly, miserable recently with all the stuff that's been going on with injuries and VAR and his problems with the fixture schedule. So just to see him smiling and hugging the players and that. And I think he came out afterwards and said that it's one of his kind of favourite Champions League nights as Liverpool manager, which is quite a statement given the games we've had. But yeah, you're right in the context of what's come before, kind of off the back of that Leicester win, which was so emphatic. Then there was the Atalanta loss and the huge frustration of Brighton at the weekend. To have three kind of consecutive disappointing results in a row would have felt like a kind of a mini slump, which I think you wanted to avoid at all costs, really. And as I'm sure we'll come on to in terms of rest and rotation, it's massive in terms of having that dead rubber game next week where he can play whoever he likes without any consequences. And he's already topped the group, so there's literally nothing to worry about there. And for us, it's quite unfamiliar just to be able to go into the final group game without any stress, not needing a result. I think it's the first time in Klopp's tenure that that's been the case, that they've had qualification wrapped up a game early. So, yeah, couldn't ask for anything more. And the players, the young guys who we'll come on to, all did brilliantly. So, yeah, it was a really kind of morale-lifting night.
It's a real sense that he sort of backs the process and gets the win from that, Mark. To me, it's the elements of everything that's passed in terms of the arguments about VAR, the arguments about the squad, the arguments about substitutions, the argument about scheduling and broadcasters. But he has to, I think he feels like he has to nail his colours to the mast last night in terms of team selection, but also how he uses the side over 90 minutes. It was never going to be a game that Liverpool ran away with, nor was it going to be one that ran away from them. But it was one where he sort of needed to roll the dice in terms of players who were risking injury. And also it was one where he needed players for 90 minutes. And I think to sort of get that first and foremost, I mean, look at Robertson for an example, opens his ligaments up early on and manages to play through. So to go through all of that and then to have Brighton and not get the win, it would have felt so disheartening. And I think today, if they've gone in for the recovery session or whatever, I think that training ground is bouncing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but last night, Tuesday night, that was probably one of the first Liverpool games I've quite enjoyed watching for quite a while. You know, it was from a football perspective, you know, both teams trying to score. It was very open, end-to-end entertaining game. But also it was just nice not to have, you know, the whole, you know, farcical nonsense of VAR take over the game, which was not, you know, which has dominated what the Liverpool games recently, certainly the Premier League. But it was just a nice game to watch. But yeah, you're right with the touching on the Robinson thing. You know, when he went down with touching his ankle, you feared the worst at that moment. But you know, he is a soldier. You know, just needed some strapping on his ankle. He was good to go. We'd found out after the game. You know, Henderson apparently took a knock in the back. You know, that just shows you what kind of soldier he is to the team. You know, he's not going to go down without a fight. You know, we saw that against Barcelona in the season when they won the Champions League, played through this whole second half of that game throughout injury. So, you know, like you said, the team is absolutely going to be, right, so bouncing. You know, it's certainly the most uplifting that we have felt probably after a game. You know, they beat last week, but, you know, there was couple of injuries, you know, just things knocking around, but now things just starting to feel a bit slightly sunny on the horizon. You know, Trent's on his way back. I know, you know, it's not good Alisson being out, but you know, the performance from Kelleher I thought was absolutely outstanding. I want to touch on him as well as some of the other young lads soon as well. But yeah, it was almost a perfect performance. Not just, you know, getting the group wrapped up, getting top spot wrapped up, that's obviously a given, but just the morale side of it in showing what despite all the adversity that's been thrown at them over the last few weeks, that they've come out of the other side of it.
I mean, the big thing, Joel, is pre kick-off is the selection of Keith Kelleher, and I think I want to ponder sort of between us why we think that is, and I think it's really easy to just say, yeah, Adrian's burnt his head out against Aston Villa or whatever else, but I think there's a real sort of context of the situation here with this. Firstly, I think it plays out in the way the game goes. So you see that Ajax are determined to press, they're determined to try and stop Liverpool from getting out. And there's a few instances there where you wonder if the goalkeeper was different, whether Liverpool might have got caught in those defensive areas on the ball while trying to play through a press, for example. But also, like I said, there's the change in situation. So last season when Adrian comes in, I think with the players Liverpool have available, Virgil van Dijk, Joe Gomez, Joe Matip, I think they're able to say, well, we shut the game down on our terms. Like if we decide we're going to win a game 1-0, then we can literally do that. And that includes not passing to this keeper for 10 minutes if he does what he does at Southampton away, for example. But I think last night, I think there's a real sense that they've looked at then and looked at now and thought, well, we don't have the personnel to bank on that. So we can't then decide how we're going to manage this goalkeeper. And therefore, we have to sort of make a decision based on that as much as anything.
Yeah, I think there's two main aspects really with the Kelleher thing. Klopp's comments after the game were very interesting, where he talked about needing his natural footballing ability is the phrase he used. I think you saw that massively. I was so impressed of how two-footed he was either side. His distribution was really good. He wasn't always getting it spot on, but in terms of the surety of his kicking, there was no kind of sliced kicks going out for throw-ins or ones that were kind of not powerful enough and getting cut out by the Ajax attackers. He was going long, he was going hard. And he just, there was a real aura of kind of confidence about everything he was doing on either side, which I think is kind of an underrated skill for goalkeepers to be comfortable on either foot. So I think that was one aspect. And I think the other thing about goalkeepers in general, which we've obviously seen with Alisson and we saw it with Adrian last season, and we've seen it the negative way in the past, is that as a position, it's much more, it's got a lot more than just ability that's important. It's also about the kind of the aura and how the teammates respond to it. And it's almost like when there's enough incidents that go wrong with a certain goalkeeper, we as fans kind of get nervous when we're on the ball and we're nervous when we see them on the pitch, but also the players themselves. I think there's enough players on the Liverpool team who've been on a pitch of Adrian making mistakes in big moments, but they just don't trust him now. And I think that's massive. We had it with Mignolet and Karius when they both reached a point where their teammates didn't trust them. You could tell the fans got nervous. And I think with someone like Kelleher coming in, who's only really played in the domestic cup games, and obviously they see him in training, but he's got none of that baggage with him. It's a fresh start, it's a clean slate for him, and it was really nice to see as well after the game. Obviously Klopp went straight over to him, but the players themselves looked really happy, not just for him but for Curtis and Neco as well. And Kelleher's interview for BT Sport was lovely as well, and a big smile on his face. And I do think that for that position it does make a massive difference when you don't have any of that sort of extra baggage that comes with it.
I mean, it's also, in many ways, Mark, it's a bit of a free hit for the manager in that, look, if it goes wrong last night, then he puts Adrian in for Wolves. It's as simple as that. But if he rolls the dice in the way in which he does and he gets the performance he gets from Kelleher, well, you would assume now that with Alisson being out, that Kelleher keeps the share for Wolves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the outside looking in, it seems absolutely definite that Kelleher starts against Wolves, barring obviously any other fitness issues. But yeah, I mean, it was going back to the confidence side thing that Joel referenced there. With Kelleher, when he's obviously at the start of the game, you've not seen him in this kind of environment before. There was a bit of nerves around, can he meet the expectations, meet the standards? But as the game went on, just the confidence, certainly from my perspective, and you could tell with the players all grew in him, around in him. There were many times where, linking with Adrian, for example, like Matip and Fabinho would never pass Adrian in some of those situations that they did to Kelleher, and they did hit him with ease and got out of them quite comfortably, whether it was blasting the ball down to the far end of the pitch or cutting it out to the fullbacks. He was very, very comfortable with his feet, which Klopp referenced this after his interview. But yeah, I mean, to go on to Wolves, that's going to be a very tough game, certainly for the defensive side of things. They're a very pacey attack that they have. They like to press. They're very, very similar to Liverpool in that regard. So they are going to need someone who is comfortable with the ball at their feet. And if you had to push anybody right now, who is the better goalkeeper, certainly at their feet, is certainly going to be Kelleher over Adrian. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Joel, just a couple of other performances and things to note on in terms of the youngsters. I thought it was fascinating that Klopp said post-match that he had a long chat with Neco Williams after Brighton. Mm-hmm. And, we don't know what constitutes a long chat in Jurgen Klopp's world, but, it's the emphasis on the word long, and it feels like there's some home truths been said there. I think he hints at the fact that he says that he's a better player than what he's sort of put across at the minute. And I think that kind of comes out post-match. There's the video of Klopp when he runs on the pitch and he's made up for Kelleher, but by God, he's thrilled for Williams. And it feels like, that's a real sort of testament that he can sort of put to him now. That's a real sort of thing that he can get Neco round the arm by and say, look, you just dealt with David Neres there for 90 minutes. Don't be worried about what Brighton have got. Don't be worried about whatever, lower half Premier League table, with all due respect, winger is throwing at you. This is the level you can play at, and you're proving it.
Yeah, it's been interesting to observe kind of since they've come into the first team setup, the difference in terms of confidence between Neco and Curtis. And when they both came in last season in the League Cup and the FA Cup early rounds, they're both really confident on the ball and kind of looked very kind of like they weren't overawed by the occasion or anything. What you have seen, I think, when Neco's had a few kind of slightly dodgy games here and there, like the Brighton one, and there's a couple of others, whenever it was, and he was getting all that ridiculous abuse on social media last season, I think it was, is that he does get a little bit knocked, and I think he kind of goes into his shell a little bit. You saw that in the first half of the weekend against Brighton when, he had a couple of iffy moments early on and he just never quite recovered from it. He was kind of taking the easy option of his pass, and I think it also showed the fact that his teammates were almost kind of missing him out. I wrote a piece after the game on how Liverpool's attack basically only came down the left-hand side because they were purposely avoiding passing to that area of the pitch. And it was a total contrast to see last night. That's why it was so nice. He did have a couple of sort of slightly edgy moments early on, but he grew into it really well. And by the kind of second half, really, he's one of the kind of driving forces in the game. And I know he gets a bit fortunate with the cross, and I don't think he intends it to go exactly how it does with Onana leaving it like that. It's just a kind of a hopeful ball in, but he puts it into the right area. And I was so happy that he did get that little bit of luck and gets the assist. And yeah, you're right to say as a reference point for him now moving forward, as much as you can talk down the quality of the Dutch league in general, he's played a Champions League game which Liverpool needed to get a result in, or at least were trying to get a result in to qualify from the group early at Anfield. And this is a team who were obviously in the Champions League semi-final not so long ago, obviously different players and stuff, but it is a high caliber match, and he's come out of it as one of the outstanding performers. So yeah, like Mark's reference, I think Trent should hopefully be drawing kind of pretty close to a return soon. But Neco's going to get more chances over these next few weeks and across the season. And I think just to have that in his back pocket now to look back on will benefit him hugely.
It also plays out in sort of the players' social media accounts, I think, Mark, at full time. You see how many of them are referencing the young lads and how many of them sort of... I think there's a real moment there last night whereby they're looking at the team and they're saying, well, if this is sort of what we're going into battle with for the next couple of weeks, then we sort of know that on the basis of last night, we're all right with it. And Joel makes the point about Brighton, and it's true that, I think Liverpool were cautious of Neco Williams against Brighton until he gets hooked at half time. But I think maybe the manager's extended that talk he's had with Williams to the rest of the squad and said, look, if they're in the team, use them, trust them. They need to be used. They need to be trusted. If you're going to win a game, you're going to win it with 11. And I think to sort of then get the goal, which comes from two academy players, two of the youngster players. I mean, we'll move on to Curtis in a minute, but I'm not sure you can have that conversation about Curtis anymore. I think we just have to take it as read that he's an established Liverpool first team player now. Not a first 11 player, but he's a first team Liverpool player. He's a part of Liverpool's midfield options. But for the performance of Kelleher, for Neco to get the assist, I think it just bodes well for the senior members of the squad as well as them.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, after the full-time whistle, you saw pretty much all the senior players. I think Robertson was one of the ones that stood out to me. You know, gave a right big hug to Kelleher. It's like playing about absolutely thrilled to bits for them, and you know, probably the same for all the other senior players going over to Neco as well. You know, right to touch on like some of the stick that Neco's been getting recently, and some of it's been fair, so a lot of it hasn't. But you know, credit to him. You know, he has bounced back. You know, remarkably. You know, one thing that we have said before is like when he gets, you know, has a mistake in the game, if some, like Joel said, goes into a shell a bit, but against Ajax, he did make a couple of mistakes, not major ones, admittedly, but he bounced back from it, and I think that's testament to what, first of all, he is as a player, but also he is as a person. That yes, he can make mistakes. He knows he can. He's still young. He's only 19. He's going to learn. He's got time to develop, but you know, he's going to have to bounce back from them in mid game, and that's something you're going to have to learn as a player. And then, you know, touching on as well, one I think I mentioned before, you know, James Milner was on the bench. You know, obviously not part of the playing squad or anything like that, but he was on the bench, you know, cheering the lads on. Like, you know, those sorts of things. You know, experienced pro, someone like him who's been there, done everything there is to do, win everything there is to be won. You know, not just, you know, obviously making up the numbers on the bench, but just basically being part of helping, you know, galvanise the confidence of them as much as anything else. You know, they've got Leighton Clarkson and Jake Kane on the bench as well. Seeing someone like that on the bench, not in a playing capacity, but that being there just for morale's sake, is going to help them going forward. And then touching on to Curtis Jones, I mean, he's absolutely outstanding, isn't he? You know, we see this time last year when he was basically on the fringes of the first team, getting closer, but not really making a name for himself in terms of getting on a regular basis. But this year, I mean, he's already played 12 games, I think, in all comps, matching what he got last year already. And like you said, Dan, he looks certainly a full-fledged Liverpool first-team player, not just a kid anymore, that's for sure.
Joel, I mean, it's right, isn't it, Joel? There's loads of talk last night on BT around some of the Ajax players getting, you know, how they churn them out and stuff like that. If Curtis Jones is at any other club in Europe, he's going for 50 million. You know, if he's outside the Premier League, he's a £50 million player, and everyone's saying, "Well, who's this kid? Where's he come from?" You know, I think it's easy to sort of get lost sometimes by what you've already got when you're constantly looking around at others.
Yeah, his trajectory has been a fascinating one, really, because he came into the first team setup in pre-season pretty early on. I think when he was only sort of 16 or 17, I remember him playing a game. I can't remember exactly who it was against, but he was involved quite early on. But he never really sort of kicked on that quickly from there. He sort of spent more of his time playing for the youth teams, and I think our expectations have all been warped by Alexander-Arnold, because he's come in and just basically, as soon as he's come in, nailed down that first team place and gone on to become arguably the best right back in the world at this point in time. And that's not how it usually works with young players coming in. And I think what we've seen with Curtis this season, I think, is night and day compared to where he was even kind of earlier this calendar year, when he's scoring the goal against Everton in the FA Cup, and he plays the game against Shrewsbury Town. He's a different player now. He's so much more tactically switched on. His off the ball work I've been kind of staggered really at how much he's just stepped forward really in his development. He looks like he understands what it means to be a Liverpool midfielder in the system. I think that's been the most pleasing aspect. His natural flair and ability on the ball was evident last season, and his confidence has never been in doubt. But we've said it time and time again with players like Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, even Fabinho when he first came in. There's a lot of other stuff to kind of incorporate into your game if you're going to become a regular in this team, and he's had to do it probably quicker than he would have expected this season. It's been out of necessity because of all the injuries, but I think if you are going to take one positive out of a situation, we'd all like to be watching Thiago right now. Of course we would, but the fact that he's kind of being thrust into the limelight in games like this, and I don't think any of us have any problems ever seeing him on the team sheet, whatever the opposition now. I think you completely trust him, and so does a manager.
Yeah, I almost like that he doesn't try and run himself into the ground, you know. I almost like the fact that he doesn't try and sort of impress by gegenpressing, if you like. He's sort of very, very confident in his own ability, like you say. He technically backs himself. And I think that's where they try to work with him, to be honest. I think they've looked at him and said, well, I think they say they've got no worries about him sort of the final third of the pitch. I think they probably tried to work on him a little bit going backwards. And I think it's showing, you know. I think last night there's tons of maturity. He goes and helps Neco out, for example, for the first 30, and just gives him a 10-15 yard pass. And that's two players of the same age, but he looks every inch the senior pro. and that's no disrespect to Williams, but yeah, huge encouragement from Curtis Jones. And I think just in general, Mark, now, just to wrap up last night, I mean, the concept of getting qualified is massive. They've got that game next week against Midtjylland, but Liverpool can sort of park the Champions League until sort of late February now. And for everyone's sake, I mean, considering the fact that they're walking wounded, especially, that's a huge positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why Klopp was absolutely thrilled to bits, with the at the final whistle yesterday, purely because he knows that he can give his players after Wolves, a week's rest, pretty much going up to Fulham, and that's something that they've not had. Obviously, they had the international break, but that's something that since the matches have started again, that they've not had. And yeah, I mean, just looking at the sorry, can you just remind me again? Sorry, I forgot what you said. Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's fine. I mean, it's just basically just touching on the concept of getting qualified and the benefits of getting qualified out the group. I mean, you rightly touched on the Fulham turnaround there with Midtjylland in the middle. I mean, it's not so much guessing what a team against Midtjylland would be, but I think it's more the point that that pressure's off now, and this Liverpool side can, in a way, start to look at how they can get bodies back on the pitch.
Yeah, definitely. You're right. I mean, in terms of the team against Midtjylland, we're all sitting here thinking, is it basically going to be the under-23s, a bit like when it was against Aston Villa in the Cup last year? I certainly think we'll see some of the big boys rested. I can't imagine seeing any of the front three starting. I'll be amazed if Gini Wijnaldum starts, Henderson, Robertson, even Trent Alexander-Arnold if he comes back against Wolves. That's obviously depending on his fitness levels. We don't know that for sure yet, but even if he is fit, I don't think they'll risk him. Alisson obviously won't be fit either, so I think Kelleher will get another go. But yeah, but at the same time, I think you've got to have some experience in there. You can't just say, "Oh, here's the whole under-23 to go and have a go in Europe." I don't think you should put all of them out, but I think certainly the vast majority of them is going to be, fringe players for under-23s. Leighton Clarkson, Jake Kane, as we've just mentioned. Divock Origi, I think he'll probably get a game as well. We need to get some game time. Shaqiri, if he comes back from injury, and then you've got Minamino, who, when he has played, hasn't been quite at it for one reason or another yet. And that might be an opportunity where, the pressure's off. There's nothing riding on this game at all. Go out and express yourself, see what you can do. And then, in terms of, resting the players linking up to Fulham, it's going to be absolutely vital that with the injuries, with the quick turnaround, that they get these players back fit and firing as quick as possible. Oxlade-Chamberlain, we don't know when he's going to be back yet. Thiago, not until next year. Naby, sounds more hopeful than what we thought it would be when he went down against Leicester. So all of a sudden you're getting all these players back sooner than you probably would have thought initially. But yeah, to be able to give these players, time to rest and recover is absolutely massive at this stage of the season for sure.
Wolves now feels huge. I think, Joel, on many fronts, it feels, especially, I think we're sort of a dodgy VAR decision away from saying Jurgen Klopp's had the perfect week. And I think there's a bit of Brighton that is going to still be stinging in the build-up to Wolves, that they should have sort of, by rights, got over the line with the 1-0. Wolves feels huge to me. It feels like it's needed, and it feels like unfair in many senses to sort of ask Liverpool to enter another must-win game off the back of the one that they've just sort of 10 hours ago come off with this one. But at the same time, they don't stop. And I think that there'll be a point in which, if they get the result against Wolves, I actually think Midtjylland might look a little bit stronger than people are suggesting, to be honest. And I think the reason for that is that, he knows he's got the sort of the turnaround to Fulham, but also I think he might want to ride a bit of a wave if they manage to get the result on Sunday.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about this. There's quite a lot of parallels to last season in terms of where the fixtures lie and their sort of significance in the season. So Wolves at home, for some reason, I know it was just a scrappy 1-0 win just before New Year last season, but it comes straight after Leicester away, which is obviously just after the Club World Cup. And obviously the way they won that Leicester game was so impressive, one of the best performances of the Klopp tenure. But they still had to go and beat Wolves at Anfield. It was almost a game that people took as a given. And I think, this one does feel similarly significant. I know they don't have that huge lead that they had last season. But in terms of building momentum again off the back of kind of last night and kind of responding after the Brighton disappointment. It does feel massive, and I think if you look ahead to the December schedule in general, you referenced Fulham up next, and I think is it Tottenham is the one after that. They do need to kind of get a run of wins together here, and I think relative to what their sort of rivals have, I know it's probably a little bit early still to be talking about Spurs as genuine title contenders, but they are up there, so you have to kind of treat them with respect. But they've got Arsenal this weekend, and then they've got a run of tricky games coming up after that. And City have got United coming up soon as well. So teams who Liverpool expect to be competing with this season are going to be dropping points throughout this period. And I think, we've not seen a consistent run of wins. The results have been kind of more or less fine, really, since the Villa debacle. But they need to now put that Brighton thing behind them and just kick on. I think this weekend, the Wolves games are always hard, really. They're always an opponent that I don't particularly look forward to playing. And I know they won't have Raul Jimenez, obviously. But they've still got really tricky players who are in good form. I watched them the other night against Arsenal. Neto and Podence in particular are really quick, skillful players who can cause problems. And they're playing a different system now, which makes it a slightly unusual challenge compared to what you're used to with them. So, I do expect it to be a tough one. But if Liverpool can get the 3 points and then get that full week off before Fulham, it feels like you're really nicely set up going into Christmas period.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we want to bring you in on some of the things we're writing on Liverpool.com this week, and they are some of our collaborative pieces, and we're going to do a little bit of quick fire of those pieces on here and give you a bit of a chance for interaction on the comments, etc. on YouTube. So let us know what you think, and we'll get around the room now. So the first one we're going to build up to is our sort of yearly awards, and we're starting this week with Moment of the Year. Now, an obvious one stands out, but we know that obviously there's different things that mean different things to different people. In Liverpool's 2020 odd calendar year, should we say. So Mark, I'll come to you first. When I say the obvious one, I come to you because I know that you told us you picked it.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who grew up, obviously supporting Liverpool from an early age and dreaming of seeing Liverpool winning the Premier League title, that is, and it probably always will be, the moment it was confirmed, will live with me forever. Personally, obviously it wasn't watching the game, which is probably the only thing that probably hinders it a little bit. It was just seeing, I think I had Sky Sports News on at the time when it was confirmed. Just seeing some like the club legends, Kenny Dalglish there, almost crying with like happiness, and pretty much everyone watching that, you can't help but be moved by things like that. And seeing Klopp get crying as well, when it was confirmed, it was an emotional moment purely because, there was a time when obviously after lockdown there was doubt about whether the season would restart again, whether it would get null and void, all those shouts from naysayers saying things like that. So to have it get over the line, albeit not in the circumstances anybody would have wanted, no fans, no crowd, no parade, all those things there that, in a perfect world we would want back. But at the moment, if you'd have asked me, any time in my childhood that I would be alive to see Liverpool win the Premier League title in any way, shape or form, I'd happily snap your hands off for it.
Joel, what about you?
I was going to ask you first, just so I don't take your one and see what's left.
Mine is actually, this sounds mad. So I need a bit of context to this. I couldn't really celebrate the league win for matters known to myself, which I won't go into. And I really I hated the behind closed doors thing, if I'm honest. It really tarnished it for me. I've got to be perfectly honest. And the fact that we haven't had a parade to celebrate it, it was great. It was emotional. It was everything else. But yeah, that really took a shine off it. Mine is actually Thiago Thursday. Genuinely, honestly, that day was just. I don't know, even down to sort of the club's video content and everything else, and then Jota comes off the back of it. But it was sort of the reason you remember why you love football in many senses, in that that childhood excitement. And after everything we've gone through in the year with lockdown and everything else, And the fact that we were after Thiago, but really we weren't, or really we was, and it was just all this mixed messaging. To sign one of Europe's best players just really just stoked that sort of childish excitement that makes you fall in love with the game. So that was mine, to be honest. I had a little think about it, but yeah, that's what mine's going to be.
Yeah, it'd be nice if he still existed and played games of football, but
we had
everything, can you?
We had that day. That day was lovely.
Yeah. There was two that stuck out for me. One, I'm surprised no one's mentioned it already, is Salah against Man U at Anfield. Does feel kind of a little bit of a cheat answer because there's like a pre-pandemic world and there's the post, but it's still in 2020. So I think for most people that is the definitive when Liverpool definitely won the league moment, the celebration of Alisson and everything. That's one. I mean, other one, I think slightly weirdly, but for me it sticks out, is the most I think I've celebrated a goal, maybe behind closed doors, but at home in a long time, was the Trent free kick against Palace in the 4-0. So it was the first goal Liverpool had scored post-project restart, and it just felt the way that game was going, being like a frustrating kind of start, Liverpool being dominant but hadn't got the breakthrough. And as soon as he scored that, you knew they were going to win. And as soon as they won that game, you knew that it was always going to be a matter of time. But that game just solidified everything. And then you could look forward to the Chelsea City game the next night. And yeah, there was something about Trent scoring that goal which just felt like, yeah, finally, after 3 months, we're going to get this thing over the line.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 good shouts there. All right, another collab we're running this week, which I think is out Friday. So be sure to check out Liverpool.com for that. Is the player that Liverpool have sold that you would have back now? And have we put a limit on this in terms of, is it Klopp tenure? I think we
said Klopp tenure. Yeah.
It's Klopp tenure, and Coutinho isn't allowed. So if you're getting involved at home or whatever, then they're the rules, they're the stipulations. Mark, I'll come back to you.
It's an interesting one because I think I've said before, like, given the current predicament that Liverpool found themselves in, they could do with another centre back. And the first person that came to my mind was Mamadou Sakho, who during his time at Liverpool, I absolutely loved to bits. Still have a fondness for him. But when I actually properly sat down with my head and thought about it, I mean, I went with Danny Ings. Personally, when he left, I was good to see him go because he was just a player who, when he was here, he absolutely loved to bits. When he was there, he gave everything, and had, you felt sorry for him with the fact that he had so much bad luck with injuries. Seeing him go on and doing so well at Southampton, you can't help but be happy for him. And then the fact that Liverpool could do right now with a backup striker at some times, with Divock Origi not firing, the fact that they could do with someone who gets you a goal in any situation, albeit his fitness levels aren't at the best. But for me, he'd be the one I'd choose. Can
I just ask why Sakho and not Lovren?
I don't know. I mean, I just have more of a fondness for Sakho for some reason. I can't explain it. I could easily point to the fact that the Dortmund game when they won 4-3, but they both scored that night, so I can't have that as an excuse either. But I don't know. Yeah.
Good old Mamadou, whatever happened there. He's been vindicated as well, which, let's not go into that. Joel, do you know yours?
I do. I'm scared, a little bit scared about the comments.
It might be. I think I know what you're going to say.
It is Emre Can. I always really liked him, to be honest, as a player. I know he frustrated a lot of people, and he had the occasional kind of horror game. But I think, where Liverpool are now, the prospect of a player who can play centre back and centre mid, who kind of knew the system. Klopp really liked him as well. He didn't want to lose him when he did. It was purely a contract thing, like we're kind of seeing now with Wijnaldum, albeit that was earlier in Can's career. He's had a bit of a funny time since leaving Liverpool, went to Juventus, obviously never really established himself, and has kind of had good games at Dortmund, but never really become the player I think people thought he once could be. But he's still only 26. And I still think if he was at Liverpool, he'd be getting games regularly, especially given the injury situation now. And there is a part of me which would have liked to have seen what kind of player Can developed into if he had a couple more years under Klopp in this team. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, I am. I'll go for Dejan Lovren. I just think he's won the centre. He's won the Champions League. He's won the Premier League. If he's in that squad now, if he's fit now, then it solves a myriad of problems, basically. And you could play him and Joel Matip, and I'd say that you wouldn't necessarily have a world of worries if you did so. So I'll go Lovren on that one.
I'm surprised no one said Moreno.
I'm surprised anyone would say Moreno, to be honest. Last one is goal you've celebrated most in a stadium. Now, I haven't had a chance to think about this. I'm gonna restrict it to Anfield because it's obviously the context of Liverpool being in a stadium with supporters for the first time since March, come Wolves on Sunday. So, Mark, I'll come back to you. Can you think of one off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I bring it up, I mean, I'm going to hop back to your play that you picked is Lovren's against Dortmund in the 4-3. You know, that game will always stand out for me personally. I think I was at the top of the Anfield Road end. I was at the opposite end of the stadium when Lovren scored that goal. I think I've mentioned in a piece before that I've written that, at the time, I didn't know even who scored the goal until I got outside the stadium because it was that loud. It was that, you could feel the stand shaking. It was just a feeling I've personally never felt in this stadium before and probably never will again. It will stay with me forever. It was probably it was all, the 3 goals before that, Sacco, who, again, I didn't know who scored that until after I got out of the stadium, then Coutinho's goal, and then Origi's goal. It was an absolutely amazing game, but, when Lovren goal went in, 90th minute, whatever it was, absolutely outstanding.
Joel, you got one?
Yeah, there's a couple that came straight to mind when you said it. One, I think you and I have mentioned before, was kind of a great kind of underrated game of the Klopp tenure is the Leicester win in 17-18, just before New Year. The second goal was Salah scores both that day, but the one when he spins Maguire and is the winner. Just felt like a huge day that season, really, and kind of obviously in Salah's first season, that was as we were kind of getting used to him becoming the world star he is today. And the other one is another game which I think has been massively lost sort of in the whole Klopp story. But I was in the COP for when we beat Arsenal 3-1 at Anfield in 16-17. It was after that dreadful January where I think we won 1 in 9 games or something. Yeah. And then there was that Arsenal game where we go 2-0 up quite quickly. And then they get a goal back. I think it's Welbeck or something in the second half. And there's a brilliant forgotten goal where Lallana kind of sends Origi away down the wing. Yeah, and Origi cuts it across. And where I was sat was basically right in line with where he scored it. And yeah, that was one of them where you're just tumbling over seats and hugging everyone around you. It felt huge. Yeah,
absolutely. I remember that game. Massive. That and the Tottenham game that season felt.
Yeah, they both came quite close together.
Yeah. The Spurs one was where I really sort of had a good night out after that. I've got a couple that I can think of in Anfield. I've actually got 3, but I can't decide whether I can't sort of separate them. So one is oddly, one is a game from 2000 and I think it's 04-05. It's Neil Mellor against Arsenal. Where it drops on the half volley, honest to God. I was on the last row of the old main stand and it absolutely went off. It just come out of nowhere and we were getting battered and everyone had settled for a draw, and then out of nowhere Neil Mellor with a 25-yarder. Who knew? That was really good. The other 2 was, and this sort of shows my sort of fondness for our neighbours over Stanley Park, if you like, but one of them was Van Dijk in the FA Cup against Everton. It was at the back of the Kop and just, absolutely went to bits when that went in. And the one which probably wins, which I'm probably going to plumb for, is the one on this day, actually. It's Origi 90+6. It's, honestly, I sailed down the Kop on people's heads, basically. I just aquaplaned. It was unbelievable. It was just, you couldn't put into words just how firstly sort of euphoric it was, but secondly funny. That's mine. And that's literally something that happened on this day 2 years ago today. So with that in mind, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much to Mark Wakefield and to Joel Rabinowitz. Check out Liverpool.com for those pieces. They will be on the site before the weekend, and check us out for everything that you need for context around matches, fixtures, and everything else in between. We've got you covered. So thanks very much. Stay safe. Hopefully see you all soon. Back in Anfield too.